You know, it's the kind of thing that has become so commonplace in this day and age, it really barely makes a ripple anymore. Last Thursday, new security measures took effect for all international flights entering the United States. The U.S. Transportation Security Administration announced this heightened security back in June, put them in place last week. The TSA said it was looking to enhance passenger screening, including cell phones and other electronic devices, but so far we haven't really heard much in terms of details how this affects passengers. Joining us tonight to offer some insight on the matter, Gabor Lukacs, a Halifax-based airline passenger advocate, probably the best-known airline passenger advocate in the country. I dare say maybe the only one in the country.
I'm afraid the only one. Good evening.
Thanks for joining us. So as you understand them, what do these new rules entail? What do they mean for the average passenger?
What I understand is that the new rules will mean that airlines are given more powers over us, and that makes me very unhappy. What it sounds like is that now airlines will start interviewing passengers and asking them where they are going, why they are going there, things that normally belong to the private sphere of passengers. I don't think that this is really the airline's business, where I'm going or what I'm doing.
Yeah, they're going to be asking about your itinerary, how long are you going to be there, that kind of thing, aren't they?
And I'm quite disturbed by that. I have no problem answering those questions to an appropriate officer of the law who is required to ask me those questions. I don't think any of that is the airline's business. The airline has to know that I paid for my ticket. They have to know that my baggage meets the standards, that is not overweight. They have to know that I have valid travel documents. They have to know perhaps that things that are in my baggage are safe. They have the right to ask me to open it. That's reasonable and normal. But other than that, whether I'm going for a 3-day business trip or a 3-month vacation, that is their business.
Very good point. Anecdotally, and I was thinking about this preparing for this interview today, it sort of seemed to me that security measures, which of course ramped right up after 9/11, seem to be sort of loosening over time. And then now this comes along again. Am I right about that? Were things getting a little bit easier?
After September 11th, what I've seen is a kind of knee-jerk reaction of doing something to increase people's sense of safety. In terms of achieving actual safety, doing something more nuanced, more focused, more looking to identify threats is certainly a better alternative. I could possibly support what is happening now if the questioning and interrogation were done by security officers that are state agents, who can then be held accountable through the protection that you have in your dealings with state agents.
Unlike the private employees who work for the airlines.
One concern I have in particular is one of racial profiling. I have seen it myself with respect to air transit flights from Budapest to Canada, where the airline's own security forces apparently in collaboration, which is questionable itself, with Canadian authorities, have picked out people who looked like Roma, or what you call them, gypsies, from the lineup for the flight, and would subject them to additional interrogation. In some cases, they were denied transportation. And this game of the state saying, oh, it is the airline saying it is the state which requires us to do this, this must end. There's something fundamentally wrong there, where there's no one who is really accountable for when things go wrong. Because you can think of it this way: when everything is perfect and great, we're all safer. But what happens when they pick an average passenger, a law-abiding citizen of any country, or a Canadian in particular, and just because of something about their sexual orientation, or the way they are dressed, or the color of their skin, or their religion, they get singled out for discrimination? Who is actually going to be held accountable for that?
Very good question. Let me ask you this. These measures introduced by the United States have been criticized by a group called the International Air Transport Association. The CEO of that group called it very strange because there were no specific security threats that were cited in introducing this legislation. They just arbitrarily introduced it. So again, you've got, I guess, really one country dictating security for really the entire world at this point, too. Does that concern you at all?
Not the entire world, to be fair.
Flights going into that country.
Flights going into, same way, if we Canadians decided that we are going to allow people to get on our flights coming into Canada, only if they subject themselves to some security measures. We could do it. Is it wise to do it? Is a different question.
Right.
In terms of wisdom, though, I lived in Israel for 9 years myself, and they have quite strict security measures when you fly in and out.
Sure.
But those are not airline agents. At least they didn't used to be airline agents at the time I lived there. They were state agents, for the good and for the bad. They had no interest to collude in any way with the airline.
Right.
They would not use security concerns as a smokescreen to prevent a passenger from flying when they don't like the face of the passenger, or when a passenger is being assertive about their rights, or when the flight is overbooked. So normally you would want a person in such a position of power to be at least some level of impartiality, and not to have financial interest adverse to you, the passenger. Just imagine that scenario. You go up there, the flight is overbooked by 3 passengers, security buddy gets told, you know, we have 3 passengers who need maybe some more intensive security screening. Unfortunately, they missed the flight. It's so unfortunate.
And suddenly you can't make that flight. Yeah. What's the better way? What's the better way to do this, do you think?
I would say that screening passengers through pre-flight questioning is not unreasonable if it is done by state agents and if it is done within the constitutional framework that we have in Canada, with the appropriate system of checks and balances. And as long as it's done in a non-discriminatory, equal way, it can provide far more safety quite often than some of the somewhat obscure measures, like you cannot even bring a small scissor on board.
Right.
While actually you do know that many times you do end up with some things like that in your baggage, even though they are supposed to have them taken out. I actually once ended up in a situation where I realized after I arrived that I had a small blade right in my hand baggage.
In the hand baggage?
Yeah.
They didn't spot it?
They didn't spot it out. They did spot the small scissors, but not the actual blade.
Interesting. Interesting. I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, Gabor. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me, Bruce.
Gabor Lukacs is a Halifax-based airline passenger advocate, a mathematician actually by trade. He's launched 27 cases with the Canadian Transportation Agency over the last 10 years, and he's won 24 of them. Joined us tonight to talk about the new security measures introduced last fall for all flights entering the United States. Stay with us. We'll be right back.